Yeah, so we've got about $32 million in the treasury now, subsequent to the Outacompo investment and the top-up that was done by the confidential corporate investor. So we're well funded now out for the next 2 years or so, well out into 2025. So sitting in a really good position from a treasury standpoint. Never had more cash in the bank and been in a better position to aggressively advance, the company on multiple fronts simultaneously.
The Financial Survival Network. Now more than ever. The Financial Survival Network.
Welcome. This is Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. We are getting a sponsor client update from FPX Nickel CEO Martin Turan. And Martin, hey, I saw you in New York at the mining conference. The news was just coming in so fast, I barely had a chance to talk with you. But hey, we had Outacompo's $16 million private placement, global stainless producer, and then your anonymous strategic investor ponied up another $2 million to protect their 9.9% position. I mean, the news just keeps coming here, Martin.
Yeah, it's been a great year so far, just year to date. I mean, you think back to the last 6 months, late fourth quarter of last year, we announced the initial investment from a corporate strategic investor. As you mentioned there, we haven't identified their identity, but they are a large corporate group. We got, funding from the Canadian government under the critical mineral strategy. We've signed a joint venture agreement with JOGMEC, the Japanese state agency for nickel exploration. And more recently, this investment from Outacompo. Just for your listeners' background, Outacompo is the largest European stainless steel producer, one of the largest stainless steel producing companies in the world. They are very focused on producing high quality, high ESG, low carbon products for their customers. They have had some reliance in the past on nickel being sourced from Russia. They're now having to look forward and think about where their nickel units are going to be coming from, and with a real focus on getting it from friendly countries like Canada and from low carbon sources. And so they sought us out late last year. We commenced a period of discussions. They spent a lot of time and energy on due diligence, and that ended up in them making a very significant investment where they own 9.9% of us. And they bought those shares in a private placement at a 40% premium to our share price. So really great outcome for us. Excellent new shareholder to have on the register, and a group that really provides huge technical validation and endorsement of our project.
And finally, the market is taking notice of FPX once again, and the share price has appreciated substantially.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say we're really not really satisfied with that at all. I mean, yes, we are up about 20 to 25% on a year-to-date basis. Most of our peer nickel companies have struggled this year. They're typically down 20 to 30% across the board. So I guess our relative performance has been pretty good, but we still view ourselves as absurdly valued at these levels and still see significant opportunity. And I think a great benchmark for people to look at for how to judge that value is going to be the preliminary feasibility study that we're working on. The PEA, or preliminary economic assessment, we did in 2020, placed an asset value of around 1.7 billion US on our project on an after-tax basis, using an 8% discount rate. And we feel very confident that the next stage of study will continue to show a very, very robust economic profile for our project Baptiste, and still show that our current market capitalization, just over 100 million US, is extremely low versus our inherent project value.
Yeah, and that's without any consideration of the Van project as well.
That's right. So Baptiste is already one of the largest undeveloped nickel deposits in the world. It will underpin an operation that that is forecast to be one of the 10 largest nickel mines in the world in terms of annual production of nickel. We've made a new discovery in recent years at the Van target, which is located about 4 miles away from Baptiste, and Van is showing the signs of being sort of Baptiste scale. So we're really in the process here of unlocking the potential for a district multi-generational nickel operation here. And we still think that's not at all well reflected in our share price or valuation.
And along those lines, just appointed a new VP of exploration, Keith Patterson, extensive exploration experience, El Dorado, impeccable credentials. That kind of plays into what you're saying there.
Yeah, so Keith is joining us, as you say, from El Dorado, where he was, running their project generation for quite a long time. Extensive experience working in a variety of jurisdictions around the world looking for gold. So we're very lucky to be able to bring him over to FPX. His primary responsibility will be to be running the joint venture that we have with JOGMEC. The JOGMEC is the Japanese state agency for mineral exploration globally. They will be fully funding a 2-year program of exploration that will be managed and run by Keith and by our management group. And the objective of that exploration program will be to find other awaruite nickel deposits in that particular mineral form in which we're specialized. So again, it's a great endorsement and validation of the technical and economic viability of awaruite deposits. And specifically, JOGMEC's interests here is to find more nickel that is suitable for the EV battery supply chain to serve the Japanese automotive industry, which is obviously a main component of the Japanese economy. And Keith is really the ideal person to run that for us. We're very lucky to have him on board now.
Right. So the nature of JOGMEC, as I understand, the Japanese government has set aside $1 billion to invest in critical metals projects. So this is right up their alley, basically.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Our joint venture with JOGMEC was announced around sort of April 1st, or kicked off around April 1st, so about 3 months ago now. Thereafter, the Japanese government made some announcements regarding some funding up to $1 billion US, as you mentioned, that they've set aside as a bit of a pool or a bit of a fund that's going to allow Japanese industry to make investments to gain ownership interests in critical minerals projects globally. And the gatekeeper for those funds, or the manager of those funds, is indeed JOGMEC. So JOGMEC will act as the manager of those funds. Those funds are going to be available to Japanese private companies, trading houses, groups like Mitsubishi, Sumitomo, Mitsui, et cetera, to dip into to then turn around and make those investments. So the fact that we've already got this relationship with JOGMEC, that they've already kind of done extensive due diligence on Baptiste and on this style of nickel mineralization that we're specialized in, and the fact that they're playing this gatekeeper role really puts FPX in a good position. And we've already seen a significant increase in interest from Japanese counterparties in our project since that announcement was made regarding those funds that have been set aside for this purpose.
Pretty much, you've got amazing, strong interest from a variety of parties around the globe, and they're all kind of throwing money at you. What are your priorities here in picking and choosing the right partner?
It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, really, I would put the sort of outside of sort of the government support that we're seeing from Japan, and also some of the Canadian government funding that we've seen, as well as U.S. government funding opportunities that we're pursuing. But if you look at just industry, there are 3 broad categories of groups that have shown interest in us and continue to show quite a bit of interest. One are the large mining companies who are looking at the potential to, expand their pipeline of nickel projects that could serve, their own project pipeline in the years to come, and really represent the next generation of major nickel project development. And we know that most of the large mining companies out there, particularly in the diversified and base metals realm, are very public in their ambitions to grow their nickel business. So we continue to see a lot of interest from those groups. That's number one. Number two are stainless steel companies. Again, stainless still represents about 65% of total nickel demand is for stainless, and those companies are having to scramble for where their nickel units are coming from. And thirdly are the groups that are involved in the EV, the electric vehicle battery supply chain. So those are the chemical companies, the battery companies, and the automotive companies themselves, the car companies, all of whom have an existential need to secure nickel and other raw materials to make sure that they can continue to crank out those products and ultimately, those products being the EVs that are going to be more and more on our roads here throughout the world. So, always make the analogy to anytime you might have sold a house, you want as many people coming through the open house as possible. You want as many people kind of bidding on the house to be able to put yourself in the best position to maximize value on your initial investment. Same is true for us. There's a lot of people coming through the open house for FPX right now. That's a good thing for our shareholders.
A lot of potential bidders for sure. Hey, as far as financial position of the company, what's sitting in the treasury now?
Yeah, so we've got about $32 million in the treasury now, subsequent to the out-of-company investment and the top-up that was done by the confidential corporate investor. So we're well funded now out for the next 2 years or so, well out into 2025. So sitting in a really good position from a treasury standpoint. We've never had more cash in the bank and been in a better position to aggressively advance, the company on multiple fronts simultaneously.
Right. So we're going to see more drilling, I assume, more exploration of the Van target. What else? What other uses of that capital do you foresee?
The key focus for us is really moving Baptiste forward as quickly as possible. First to a preliminary feasibility study, or PFS, which will be done in September. That's a major body of engineering that we're well down the path on now, and feeling very good about where that body of work sits and the quality of the product from an engineering standpoint, and the sort of the quality of the economics that are shaping up there. So very much forward to putting that into the public domain. Beyond that, it'll be getting into the early stages of the feasibility study, as well as continuing the environmental and cultural baseline studies that will position us to be in a position to potentially enter the environmental impact assessment process at some point in 2024. So that would be a key sort of regulatory milestone for us to formally enter that EA process. Is a significant sort of body of work in and of itself, as well as, again, continuing to advance into a feasibility study. So, when we talk to counterparties, particularly those in the downstream of the EV battery supply chain, they are thirsty for nickel. They're thirsty for it to come online as quickly as possible. And we're certainly, advancing Baptiste according to that kind of need that we see out there, while at the same time, obviously, kind of respecting and collaborating with our Indigenous partners who are so critical to the success of the project.
Yeah, well, you definitely have a full plate ahead for sure. Now, let's just go back to what you were mentioning with bringing on Keith Patterson, exploration, finding other awaruite nickel deposits. I assume you're going to be aggressively pursuing that venture as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like I said, the Japanese government via JOGMEC is thirsty for more future nickel operations, and that really starts with exploration. We have a demonstrated capability of being able to find these awaruite nickel deposits. We did a significant amount of work on a global search for this style of mineralization about 10 years ago now. And so we have a good sort of database, and we have a bit of a rolling start into reinitiating that work, really to be led by Keith and leveraging that previous experience. And we're really excited about the idea that we could be making new significant discoveries of large awaruite deposits to the benefit of FPX shareholders, but without FPX having to bear any of the costs of that exploration for at least the next 2 years. So it's really free upside for FPX shareholders. So, investors who are really looking at, and motivated by exploration success can have that inherent in their ownership of FPX shares, but where we're actually bearing no cost and no risk in those efforts. So it's a pretty unique set of circumstances.
Hey, a lot of companies are, I'm sure, envying FPX's position there, because to have the upside without the downside is rather unique in today's investment landscape. So as far as geographical location of these deposits, are they in North America? Without tipping your hat, is this a global search you're engaging in?
Yeah, I mean, at a high level, you can do a search on ophiolites and on serpentinized peridotites throughout the world using basic, like publicly available geological information published by national geological surveys and the like. We see prospectivity for this type of deposit in multiple countries around the world. In the past, we had visited something like a dozen countries, and I think there are some of those countries we can go back to. That would be, include places in North America, places in Europe, and elsewhere, as well as new countries we've never set foot in that could well be on order. But we do feel as if we have an important first mover advantage in this. Frankly, we're surprised to see that there aren't more companies that have that are targeting this style of mineralization. So that first mover advantage is important for us to continue to preserve and move quickly on.
All right. Well, that's quite a transition from just a few years ago to now. And in addition, the price of nickel has been cooperating. We're back over $10 a pound. In spite of copper showing a little weakness, can we infer or learn something from that relationship right now, Martin?
Yeah, I mean, they've been moving, typically in tandem, price of copper, price of nickel over the last several years. That's a historical kind of fairly stable relationship. That ratio, as we've talked about in the past, of nickel price to copper price, usually in the range of 2 to 3x. If people think about a copper price going forward, you see the copper price being, some people saying they see $5 or $6 copper in the years to come. That would imply, if that ratio continues to hold, a nickel price in the region of sort of $10 to $18 a pound. That's a very interesting price for a project like ours, where we expect the operating costs in the upcoming study to be in that $3 or so range, maybe a little bit higher. So a very high margin project throughout the cycle, particularly in a world where we're seeing elevated nickel prices going forward. So, the mid and long term thesis on copper and nickel continues to be, to me, just incredibly robust, and it's something that investors are still not fully and properly attuned to the opportunities represented by FPX, and frankly, other companies that have strong, copper and nickel projects that they're moving forward.
We really see this so much in the resource sector now, where the major players in the sector are in a desperate, almost panic search for resources. And the individual investor is kind of sitting on the sidelines, not knowing what to make of it, and not participating in what has become a global scramble for resources, especially battery metals. So I find FPX Nickel's position here really interesting, because investors are starting to pay attention, albeit minor interest perhaps right now, but it could indeed be an indicator of future investor interest, not only in FPX, but in the sector as well.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, listen, most of the last 10 years has been a very painful one if you've been along the junior mining sector, right? So we need to continue to see, robust commodity prices. We need to continue to see strong performance quarter over quarter, significant free cash flow generation by the large diversified companies who can demonstrate that quarter over quarter for 4, 6, 8 quarters. Once those conditions are in place, then you'll start to see a trickle down of interest to the mid-tiers and to the smaller companies. That's how it's been in previous cycles, and it's how I expect it to go in this cycle as well.
We totally agree with you. Hey, you want to go over to fpxnickel.com, sign up for notifications. You will be getting a lot of them in the upcoming weeks and months ahead. The ticker symbols US FPOCF, and in Canada, of course, FPX. Martin, we will touch base with you shortly, hopefully, and get an update from you as to all the latest developments.
Thanks a lot, Kerry. Appreciate it.
The Financial Survival Network.